An event took place in Silua in Lithuania, which is little known but merits attention. It happened centuries ago, but has a certain ring about it which could be modern as well. There is a link actually with the East insofar as a miraculous icon came there when a Catholic church was built in 1457 in the land of a governor called Petras Simonas Getaudas. A miraculous icon was brought there from Rome that year as a gift to this governor. The new church then gained fame as a Marian shrine. The Catholic faith had come to that country as a result of intermarriage with a Polish princess in 1387. The Grand Duke and his queen were themselves responsible to a large extent for the diffusion of Catholicism in that kingdom. So this church was built on the land of the manor of that local governor. The village itself evolved from there. The church was titled the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin, the Blessed Virgin Mary and the Apostles St. Peter and Bartholomew, to be precise. So the whole area of Silua became Catholic, and Our Lady became the patron of the people. But something happened down the line which upset this well-established Catholic life. As we know, in 1517, the Protestant Rebellion started, and alas, something of what happened in Germany started to happen elsewhere. Cuius regio eius religio, of whom the region, of him too was the religion. And the people were coerced into embracing a Calvinistic form of Protestantism as time went on. In 1532, Jonas Zawisza, who would become the main political power in the area of Silua, became one of the Protestant reformers and influenced other landlords to join him. They built a Protestant chapel 1.5 kilometers away from the town. After a while, they expropriated the Catholic parish lands from the then Silua governors and handed them over to the Calvinist Protestant community. The brother of this man, Merkelis, was considered to be the founder of Silua Calvinist parish. Shortly after the property of the Catholic church building itself was expropriated, the church itself was closed. The Catholic priest, under the threat of the now powerful Calvinist landlords, who controlled jobs and accommodation were forced to switch to the new Calvinist form of Christianity. When Father John Holubka, the parish priest of the Silua church, saw what was happening, he put together an ironclad box. He carefully wrapped the treasured painting of the Blessed Virgin Mary and Child, this miraculous icon, which is very Russian in style, all the liturgical vestments, and the documents which proved that Vytautas the Great had given the land to the Catholic Church, and he put all of these together in the iron box. Then he sealed the box and buried it deep in the ground, in a field some distance from the church, near a large rock that could then be eventually an identification for him in the future. His action was truly inspired, because a short time later the authorities seized the church building and moved everything out of it. It seemed as if the Catholic faith had come to an end in the once fervent village of Silua. 80 years passed. The Catholic flock, with no shepherd to guide and nourish it, gradually died out completely. Only a few of the very oldest villagers dimly remembered that there had been a Catholic church in their village. A whole new Siluvia generation was brought up in the Calvinist belief. Then something happened. One summer's day in 1608, a number of children were tending their sheep in a field on the outskirts of the village of Silua. They were playing near a large rock, close to a wooded section of the field, shouting merrily to one another in carefree fun. Suddenly, one after the other, they stood transfixed, staring in the direction of the rock. In the silence, there could be heard the sound of loud sobbing. There, the children beheld a beautiful young woman standing on the rock, holding a baby in her arms and weeping bitterly. Her overwhelming grief was only too evident. She did not speak, but looked at them sadly as she stood there, weeping as though her heart were breaking. So profuse were her tears that they ran down her cheeks, and some of them fell in a small pool on the rock beneath. The woman was dressed in flowing blue and white robes, unlike any costume with which the children were familiar. Her long, light brown hair fell softly over her shoulders. A strange light surrounded both the woman and the child. So startled were the children, they could not speak, but merely stood and stared. Amazement soon turned to fright when the woman with her baby suddenly disappeared, as mysteriously as she had appeared. They all began to talk excitedly about what they had seen. One of the boys ran to the village to tell the Calvinist pastor. The pastor couldn't believe what he was hearing. Eventually, he got angry with the boy. He shouted at him to stop making up such a childish story, to go back to his friends in the fields. He summarily dismissed the boy and turned back to the book he was reading. All the children who witnessed the scene spoke about it to their parents that evening, and the next day it was the talk of the village. The parents got all the children together to question them separately, and each told the same identical story, even to the smallest detail. They questioned them as a group to see if they could get any of them to renege on the story. But they could not find any chink in their story. The children were all deadly serious in talking about it. They brought their parents to the field and pointed out the rock and explained what they saw. The Calvinist pastor, aware that the people had gathered and talked about the event, became alarmed. He felt this was the gullibility of the people, believing in a story which was to him Roman superstition. He called a meeting of all the community on a Sunday morning at the rock, where the children had claimed to see the vision, and had prepared a speech about Satan and how he could well make himself look mysterious and speak to the children in the field with a plan for Roman interference in the village. He told them that this was the work of Satan, who wanted to lead them away from their chosen faith. As he stood in front of the rock with the community in front of him, he opened his notebook with his speech in it. But suddenly there was a gasp from the crowd. They were all staring past him at the rock. And when he looked, he saw a young girl sobbing with a baby in her arms, just as the children had described. The pastor stood in amazement. He could do nothing but stare. The woman's face was clouded in deep sorrow, and her cheeks were bathed in bitter tears. Finally, the pastor regained his composure and asked, "Who are you? And why are you here?" In a voice filled with sorrowful emotion, she replied, "There was a time when my beloved son was worshipped here in the Eucharist at an altar every day, and the faith was passed on to the young. But where that altar was, you now plough and sow a different type of seed. The people need those days back." The pastor moved towards the figure, intent on pulling her down from the rock and exposing her as a fake apparition. But just as he reached out for her, she disappeared, and he was left astonished and broken. The most remarkable feature about this apparition was that it happened in a community that was totally Calvinist, except for a few very elderly Catholics who did not change to Calvinism, regardless of the pressure. Inspired by the apparition and the stories of the elderly in the community, people began to talk about their heritage and their ancestry, and the fact that their culture in the past was Catholic. It prompted meetings which aroused resentment among the landlords who had introduced this economic pressure to change people to Calvinism for the sake of their jobs and accommodation. So complete was the conviction of the people of the message from this visitor that they abandoned Calvinism, and a decade later, on the feast of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary, more than 11,000 people received Holy Communion during a Mass offered at the rock, the scene of the apparition. Sometime later, a blind man, now more than 100 years old, heard the story of the apparitions. He lived in a nearby village, and he was able to recall a night some 80 years before when he helped Father Holubka, the parish priest, to bury an iron-clad chest filled with church treasures beside a large rock. He immediately asked to be brought there, and the villagers led him to the field of the apparition. No sooner had he reached the spot, his sight was miraculously restored. Falling to his knees with tears of joy and gratitude, he pointed to the exact spot where the chest had been buried. To the villagers' astonishment, the iron-clad chest was dug out of the ground, and when opened, was perfectly preserved. They found the large painting of the Madonna and Child, the church's gold chalices and vestments, church deeds, and other documents. The painting was enshrined permanently in the Basilica of the Birth of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and is venerated to this day as the miraculous image of Silua. The Chapel of the Apparition was built in the Gothic style and features the tallest steeple in Lithuania. It was built over the rock on which Our Lady stood. The rock is there beside the altar of the chapel. It is on this rock that all pilgrims make a point to stoop and kiss the spot where Our Lady herself stood. The apparition of Silua is recognized as the first apparition of Our Lady in Europe, 250 years before Lourdes and Fatima. There is a traditional belief that Mary, while living in Jerusalem, supernaturally appeared to the Apostle James the Greater in 40 AD while he was preaching in Zaragoza in Spain. But this would be the mystical phenomenon of bilocation while Mary was still alive on earth. After the return to the devout practice of their religion, Our Lady of Silua has been invoked as the patroness of those who have lapsed from the faith. St. John Paul II prayed at the shrine in 1993, 2 years after the Baltic nation had regained independence. Benedict XVI in 2006 blessed new crowns of gold for the miraculous image of Mary and Jesus. And in 2008 he sent a papal legate to take part in festivities at Silua to mark the 4th centenary of the Marian apparition. It's not dissimilar to what happened in 1947 at Tre Fontane in Rome, where she appeared as Our Lady of the Revelation at Tre Fontane to Bruno Kunaka, who was an extreme Protestant and was about to prepare and deliver a speech against Our Lady and the Catholic Church. First, his children saw her, and then he did. And she gave him a complete instruction on the truth of the Catholic Church, indicating that the Pope was the vicar of her Son on earth, and that she had been assumed into heaven. He was to make his way eventually to the Pope. He did so, and it was one thing that prompted him eventually to declare that the Assumption of Our Lady was part of Catholic dogma. Our Lady always speaks serenely but clearly in Catholic terms, for the Church is under her mandate.